biggest issue for people became, he wrote a book about universal salvation. He doesn't believe in hell.
Oh,
So the evangelical
there we go. Welcome, everybody, to What Do Christians Say About Loneliness? And we have maybe learned more than we wanted to know about loneliness in the coronavirus epidemic that we're in. So I have found a lot of great tidbits in this book of joy that I keep showing. Vicki got me turned on to this one. So the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, and they're interviewed by someone named Douglas Abrams. And so he's the one who writes this best-selling book. And they both are very clear that loneliness is a problem in society. And this was before the coronavirus. So I can only imagine what healthcare workers are going to be dealing with. Sometimes we have no control over loneliness, and sometimes, as the book says, there's ways that we can try to help ourselves out in the midst of loneliness. So this is the Doug Abrams quote. The Dalai Lama was saying that when one is thinking about others with kindness and compassion, one is never lonely. Open-heartedness, warm-heartedness is the antidote to loneliness. It has often amazed me, Doug Adams, that one day I could walk down the street feeling judgmental and critical of others, and I will feel separate and lonely. And the next day, I can walk down the same street with more open-hearted acceptance and compassion, and suddenly everyone seems warm and friendly. It is almost as if my inner state of mind and heart changes the physical and social world around me completely. So what do we know? We have statistics about loneliness. They're pretty scary statistics. And then we know our own experience with loneliness. So I keep preaching about the Minister of Loneliness in the United Kingdom. I just think that's so amazing. That's such a health crisis that they have their own Minister of Loneliness. Because it's such
Is that like the Minister of Silly Walks?
No, it's like the Minister of football. I mean, it's a real position, like Minister of Sports. I was reading about her. She has like 3 portfolios, and one is like sports, one is Minister of Loneliness, and something else. And she said after her first child was born, she felt so alone and so lonely. She really had to figure out how to deal with this. So what do we know about loneliness? Social distancing.
Well, there's a difference between being alone and loneliness, right? So, which is obviously they're related, but you're not always feeling lonely when you're alone. If you have resources and if you know what feeds you.
And also you could be in a crowd and have lots of people around and still feel lonely. So it really does take it back to that. What's the interior space that I occupy that tells me whether I'm lonely or not?
That is very true. I had that experience probably about 18 years ago. I was at a neighborhood. They had this, when I was married, I lived in a very expensive neighborhood up in northern Westminster. And the neighborhood ladies did a bunco, this silly dice game.
Yeah.
And they took turns going to different people's houses. And I remember being in the kitchen of a lady's house, and it was full of ladies of my neighborhood. And they were all talking about things that I had absolutely no interest in. And they were talking about, like, the trips they were going to take and the football, you know, leagues their kids were in and the remodeling they were doing on their house. And none of it was touching me in a deep place at all. I didn't feel like it was any kind of, and I don't suppose bunko is really a deep activity, but I felt really, I remember distinctly standing there feeling so alone in the middle of like 20 ladies, and, you know, nobody was talking to me and I wasn't interfacing with anyone. And I was just like, why am I even here? You know, I felt like I was stuck out like a sore thumb.
Nothing that would, soul doesn't meet soul or doesn't feed your soul in a an environment where you have nothing in common.
Did you continue with these ladies in the weeks and months to come?
No, I actually did not. And I don't need every social interaction to be a super deep and meaningful, but it wasn't just the subjects that they were talking about. It was kind of the superficial way that they were talking about them. And so there just wasn't any depth at all about anything. And I found myself really bored, and I felt very apart. And I do think that I felt judgmental. I'll have to confess on myself. I was judging those ladies. In my mind, I was thinking, wow, you sure are, you know, shallow. And so maybe I was shallow.
Well, we certainly have these social Facebook and social interactions about introverts and extroverts flying through the internet world, about introverts thinking this is a great time and extroverts climbing the walls and going, please someone help me get out of this. And so, you know, certainly our internal clock helps us regulate that, but that's not the only thing that helps us regulate. I think that's what this Dalai Lama book is trying to say. You know, you can figure out if my judgmentalism is making me think of, you know, that sad thoughts or judgmental thoughts, and then I can maybe change my thinking to say, oh, that person has never had the opportunity to have someone listen to them, or whatever it is you can say to yourself and get past the judgmental part.
You know, it also connects to belonging, and whether you feel like you belong and you're a part of the group. But when you're alone and by yourself, and still that inner sense of knowing that you belong, I think makes all the difference. And, you know, as people of faith, and you realize that you belong to your faith community, or that you belong to God, that helps you. That helps me go to an entirely different kind of space, and more to that inner state of mind and heart that's where I'm not feeling the loneliness.
Did you read ahead? That was my point.
I did. I didn't even read the scripture. I'm going, oh, I should have read the scripture. Dang, sorry.
No, it's really incredibly different, I think, when you know that someone greater than you is watching over or cares about your day-to-day existence, versus who cares? Nobody cares about me. Why would anybody ever want to even bother to show up at my door or stop by? Or so I think that's a lot of a crisis that I think that we're going to see in the days and months ahead. I certainly see a lot more people outside. And I see a lot more people willing to say hello and acknowledge that you're a human being in this coronavirus.
Well, there is um, a situation, the great leveler. We're all in this together right now. We're all experiencing the same thing, which is very much out of the norm. And so I think that that kind of, you know, binds people together to a certain degree. And there has been a lot of people have been saying things like, you know, be kind, you know, be kind to each other. And so maybe some of that is, maybe some of that good stuff is rubbing off.
Wow, that would be impressive. So in the question number 2, have you found yourself having to come up with a new way of dealing with loneliness, or have you had a way in the past to deal with loneliness that seems to carry you over? I think that in-group, out-group thing is really hugely important for me too. And if there's not one person that welcomes you or acknowledges you and when you're in their presence, then you could be in a crowded room and feel terribly alone.
I was an only child and I was very lonely a lot. And my antidote was reading. I just would read anything and everything that was around. And it seemed to me, you know, taking yourself out of your life and into these fantasy lives with all these other characters, there was a richness to it that made me feel like I wasn't alone and then not lonely.
Wow, smart thinking.
I think the extra time that people have affords the opportunity for prayer, meditation, and contemplation. And I don't know how much people have actually taken advantage of that, but I think it's a great kind of opportunity. So there's the time to actually do more self-reflection, but I really enjoy currently getting out and taking walks and just, you know, connecting with nature. And I've really been trying to be more observant, flowers and birds and air, and just paying attention. So
That's
But it strikes me, you know, we've all been around the block a few times. Can I pick up on your walking metaphor? You know, we figured out, you know, each of us in our own ways, what it is. I mean, I'm thinking about, you know, probably one of my loneliest times was teenage and into my 20s, even in college. You know, college was incredibly great, but I know I often felt like I didn't fit in, or that people were having a lot better time than I was. You know, and trying to figure that out and why that was. And part of it was I didn't really know who I was yet. And, you know, and I knew it wasn't, you know, it wasn't with the people who were kind of blowing off their studies and just you know, it wasn't a party school, but, you know, that's what they were doing. They were mostly looking for somebody else to bring them, you know, to have a connection. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if that's all you do, and I knew that would never be good enough. I mean, it just wasn't going to fulfill, right? So that, and the reason I bring that up is because, you know, it's not so much for me now, but I think about people and it isn't an age thing, but, you know, who are feeling lonely, and, you know, how we can try to be sensitive to that. Boy, that one got everybody quiet.
Well, if somebody, like if you're talking about the experience of the in-group and the out-group. Say we're thinking of, I'm thinking of, say, church, for example. First of all, I think I would have to be able to identify if somebody was lonely. I don't really know if I would be able to, or maybe I just would just assume everybody's lonely and needs human connection. And then second of all, how do you make someone feel like they're part of the in-group? This is something I've been thinking about having to do with our new members at church.
Very good. Right. So, I mean, this book on the Dalai Lama and the Desmond Tutu say that we are so wired for being in community, and we have lived in a society that so much tries to isolate people, you know. So I think you're right. Everybody is wired to be with other people, and they will feel loneliness and experience loneliness. And so I think it is safe to assume that we need to be the persons that are stepping out and making sure that others are feel that they're a part of something bigger than just themselves. I think it really does kind of skip down to this sentence in number 2. Someone want to read that Bishop Tutu quote?
When you become a Christian, you are incorporated into a fellowship. So even when you go into retreat, you are never alone.
So that's the Bishop Tutu's thoughts about how do Christians deal with loneliness. You know, he's saying what Vicki was saying. Even when they're in the midst of no one in around them, they still know that they belong and there's something there with them. And I would think that, you know, people who've been in hostage situations have survived because of that. They know someone on the other side is praying for them and loving them and caring about them. Has anybody used the Psalms in their antidote to loneliness? I have some of my favorites, but I'm going to preach that on Mother's Day, so I don't want to give mine away. So the Psalms I put up here, Psalm 13, I hadn't really studied it, but it brought to my attention. Someone want to read it? It's only 6 verses long.
Oh yeah, my Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I have the Message. I can go ahead and read it out of the Message.
That's good.
Long enough, God, you've ignored me long enough. I have looked at the back of your head long enough. Long enough, I've carried this ton of trouble, lived with a stomach full of pain. Long enough, my arrogant enemies have looked down their noses at me. Take a good look at me, God, my God. I want to look life in the eye, so no enemy can get the best of me or laugh when I fall on my face. I've thrown myself headlong into your arms. I'm celebrating your rescue. I'm singing at the top of my lungs. I'm so full of answered prayers.
Wow. That's a great translation. It's almost like an about face turnaround. You notice that from the beginning to the end.
Right, right.
He's singing at the top of his lungs. What? That's pretty cool. So is he crazy or what? What's wrong with this guy?
He
Well,
just
it's like,
has, go ahead.
excuse me. It's just like a little kid that, you know, if you're talking to the back of his head, and you're talking to the back of your parent's head, and you're talking and they're not paying attention to you, then you're going to make noise. You're going to sing at the top of your lungs to try to get their attention, I would think, you know?
That's part of it.
What were
Well,
you going to say, Larry?
I don't remember right now, so go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
One of the things, you know, the biggest thing with a lot of the Psalms, I mean, even this one, even though it's 6 verses, more than half of it is his or her crying out, you know, and so and there's a lot of Psalms that are that way. They sort of at the end they come back, but you know, I think it can minimize. You know, you want to be careful that you don't minimize how painful that it is and can be. So I spent a lot of time in the Psalms because I got asked to write an article about something, and I used Psalms. It's going to be in the Messenger next month, I think. But anyway, the big thing that I came across was that these are prayers, and that, you know, they're very personal, and they're many of the Psalms we spend time with are sort of the praise ones, but actually there's a lot of the you know, not negative, but it's just heartfelt anguish over whatever, you know, lots of different things. So it's a reminder that we life's not always easy.
You can see how human these people look. So
Very much, yeah.
like Rochelle's saying, when I have to talk to the back of your head, I think it's, how long will you hide your face from me? You know, that makes me angry. You know, why are you doing that to me, and how rude, and why would you treat me like that? And so that's real anger. That's real emotion. And then at the end, he's getting some kind of relief and saying, you know what, you haven't forgotten me. My heart will rejoice in your salvation. I am not going to be kicked to the curb. I am going to be saved. So he has this kind of transformation thing that he has this transformation that happens in a lot of the Psalms.
The thing you said last week about anger being a secondary emotion, it occurs to me that being not being paid attention to or being abandoned is more of a hurt thing than it's an anger thing. So if you're not paying attention to me, I'm gonna perhaps perceive that I'm not important to you.
Exactly.
And so that doesn't feel very good. That feels very painful. And nobody wants to feel that way to someone that they love. Right.
And so if you can backtrack from the anger, it is, oh, that really hurt me. And you're not often allowed to say, I feel hurt, but you're allowed in society to say, I'm really angry. So people express whatever it is that, anger is okay to express, evidently, in our society. I've been thinking about what are the things that you've had to do less of. So you have some favorite things that you might have been able to do, but now you're doing less of. And it might be good just to moan and groan about all those things that we're doing less of. Or maybe that's good. We're just getting rid of a whole bunch of junk.
I've done a lot less shopping, particularly
Yeah, that's it, Donna.
grocery shopping and that kind of thing. So I think that's kind of a good thing.
Less driving to the grocery store.
Yep.
Just less driving around. And at one level, I miss it, but at another level, it's like, oh my goodness, I can see the mountains and it's not hazy. And so all that I think is to the good.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking we have these football stadiums, we have these baseball stadiums. There's nobody who can enter them. Why do we have these stadiums? We spend a lot of money on getting things built so we can go to them. Why do we have church buildings? You know, we spend a lot of money on building those churches.
I do miss the opportunity to play in the parks or watch other people playing in the parks. We walk through them, but you know, the activities and the just hanging out, that kind of thing in the parks that you can't do right now.
Right.
I miss getting hugs.
Yeah.
I miss getting hugs. I used to get a lot of hugs at church, and man, I feel like a plant that has not been watered lately.
Mhm.
Right. And I really dread thinking of people going into surgery, or, you know, there's more and more surgeries now opening up, and your loved ones can't even come in through the door. You know, you drop them off, say good luck, and hope it all comes out well.
And all the people that have had the coronavirus and families have not been able to visit them really.
Yeah, that's awful.
Feel really bad for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them have died alone, you know, among strangers that they can't even identify because there's masks and, you know, gowns and gloves and everything. So, you know, that's probably people's worst fear when they talk about what they're afraid of when they're going to make their transition is to be alone, you know. And in hospice, they encourage people to not be alone, to have their family and friends and network of people. And I think that that's got to be the scariest thing ever, to just be all by yourself.
Yeah, the news last night showed a priest doing, you know, the last rites, you know, for the person who was dying outside the window. Right. I mean, and of course, that was the proper thing to do, but not, you know, the human. Yeah, man, it's just a terrible thing to see and think about. You know, I do think we're going to be. See, you know, we have so much that we got to get back to normal. And maybe normal wasn't so good. You know, I mean, there really will be a hard push by our culture and by advertisers, all that. And, you know, and it certainly depends upon how the virus continues to affect us. But, you know, it can be a wake-up call, and maybe for the church, it's something, you know, and followers of Jesus that will cause us to think differently about what it means to do ministry.
That segues into my next, what
You're
I was
welcome.
thinking.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, I paid you. Okay. So the next question is what are we doing what are we doing more of? Or I already asked, what are we doing less of? What are we doing more of? And so more of being home, being contemplative, as Vicki was saying, more noticing. I mean, that's what I hope will sustain us and keep with us. I guess there's no guarantee.
Well, more Zoom meetings and more cleaning. My house has never been so clean. More cooking, less eating out, more cooking.
Right.
Well, it's certainly, and being more intentional. You know, it's easy to get distracted by all kinds of stuff. And I know earlier when with Bishop Tutu's quote, when you go into retreat, you are never alone. And it made me think of Thomas Merton. And some of you, if someone doesn't know, you can say more about that. But, you know, Merton was someone who was totally like a playboy in the world and found that wanting and, you know, eventually became a hermit. But I don't think he would say, not that he was never lonely, but I think he was, you know, developed an aloneness that was obviously very fruitful for the kinds of things he gave to the world.
He wrote some great books on how to be, have a spiritual life that has depth to it, that has resonated for a lot of Christians throughout the world.
Right, and it's not like we have to all become hermits to do that, but you know, when we cultivate, you know, that kind of thing in our lives, then we have things to give to others. You know, it's like that overflowing, the overflowing cup idea. When you have a lot, you know, it just overflows.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's more time for silence, and that fits in with your hermit and in the hermitage. I'd spend more time inquiring after people's health. You know, I just make a point of asking how you're doing and hoping, you know, wishing you to stay well. So I've I've done that more times than my entire lifetime, I'm sure. I mean, just that very intentionality that you're talking about, Dave, conscious sort of effort of paying attention to that.
I've really paid attention to what I'm grateful for. And I really want to do Bible study next week because I've been thinking about what I've been grateful for. It's the oddest things, you know, that you never would have been grateful in the past. I was so thankful for the trash collectors today. They take my trash away.
So did you clean house?
To be continued. Working on it. Oh, Lord.
Well, you know, so I know Gail's been reading a lot about Paul. Paul went away for 14 years, right? And if you think about in Jesus, you know, there actually are 30 years we know really nothing about. I mean, so, and part of that is just, you know, it's preparation, aloneness time, not, so, and we're moaning over 6 weeks, some of us, you know, I mean, so we have, I mean, it's helpful to think about that and how that can, you know, maybe change what we see. And yes, the cleaning is to be continued. It's interesting. We're having fun.
One of the things that I remember as a older child, like grade 5 through 10 or 11, I noticed nowadays it seems like parents have their children scheduled for a lot of activities. They have, you know, music lessons and dance lessons and sports and tutoring and all these things that they have to scouts and everything. And I always lately I feel kind of sorry for them, because the kids, because I remember spending a lot of time just climb up a tree, hang out up in the tree and think, and just think about all different kinds of things, just being with myself. And I don't know that when we're so busy running around, you're doing all these activities that we need, are so important to do. Do we ever give ourselves a chance to think, and just, peruse in our minds the ideas that come and go?
There's, all these businesses that are dependent on people being busy and doing stuff, and it's not a business model that can work. It's coming to a crash for the time being anyway. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people grateful for elementary school teachers nowadays. At least I hope so. They have a hard life, and parents are probably getting a good taste of that too.
Well, it's pretty silly when you get excited about getting the mail. I've had a pretty boring day today. I'm pretty excited about what I'm going to get in the mailbox today.
Yeah.
Well, it's about balance. I mean, all those, there's all those things, and we have lots of things that we can take part in or whatever. But they can be distractions if it's too much, right? So it's balance, figuring out what's important, making sure you do what's really important, and then you get to choose, the other things.
And trips, they're not on my radar anymore. I mean, I'm thinking, if when will I have a gathering with family? When will you have a family reunion? Well, not now. So those things you have to. They're really redesigning my life in that term.
Some of the things that we can't do now, that I really find that I really miss, are like listening to live music, going out and hearing my friend play music in a nightclub or a concert hall, and going to the art museum or going to the Botanic Gardens. All those things are closed right now, and that's what I would do if I had free time and it was normal times. I would go to the movies, I'd go hear music, I'd go see art, I'd go see the beautiful gardens. And I don't want to let go of those things. When hopefully when things start to return back to a sense of normalcy, we'll be able to do that. But I wonder how long it's going to be before we're ever going to be able to go to a crowded movie theater.
Yeah, they're talking about the Botanic Gardens has a gradual reopening. Our neighbor was telling us that with, doing adjusted whatever. But yeah, those are things that feed our souls that we've gotten used to, and they're not there anymore.
Right, and science is telling us you got to have a vaccine. I mean, that's the only way that, or immunity, whatever, is the only way that you can have those kinds of activities. And if we make them too soon, I mean, that's part of the frustration about, what's happening. And it's just, it's amazing. We have 1 million people infected and we think we're winning. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
Well, on that note,
yeah, that's one of my big.
Our next week will be on gratitude, so we're gonna have to practice a little bit on what we can be grateful for. because there's lots of things that will pull us off of that mindset, aren't there? Don't look at any TV news and any briefings, TV briefings. Oh, I just saw that Governor Polis was going to be on talking about meat plant closings, or something. I think he's going to be talking about. It's, yeah, I think it's scary. And who was it saying that there are people, I guess that was on the district calls, one of the pastors said their people are going to have to go back into the prison as employees of, you know, the coronavirus is in the prisons and they're mandated, they have to be back there. And it seems so hard to even imagine trying to figure that out.
If you're furloughed and they, you know, reopen your state and you decide that you need to stay home to be safe, that's, you don't have enough sick days, that's voluntary quit, and you don't qualify for unemployment insurance. So the people that own these big companies, they want us to go back because we make money for them. And we don't really have a choice about it, which, you know, land of the free.
Yeah.
There's, you know, we don't, if you want to survive and either earn, you know, some sort of wage or unemployment. I don't know. I have a friend who works in the Denver County Jail. She's a social worker down there, and they have 14 cases of confirmed coronavirus in the jail right now. And she doesn't have any choice. She has to go to work. And she has a young family, and I'd be scared to death to bring that home to my 3-year-old. Oh.
Yeah, that's cruel. It's really hard to figure. So you can only be as safe as everybody around you. That's really hard.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, the inmates in the jail deserve to have somebody working there to take care of them. So it's not like it's unethical or wrong. It's just painful and difficult and hard and troubling, and you know,
Right.
what do you do?
They're, yeah, for no fault of their own, the coronavirus is in the jail.
She's kind of a first responder. I mean, she's like a, yeah, medical personnel who has to.
Well, she's a social worker.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, anybody have final thoughts? And then I think we can have plenty of people we need to be praying for, and we don't even know their names. many examples. But
There was something I was going to tell you. There's something kind of cool that I saw. A church leader was quoted about closing the churches and not allowing people to come in crowds for services, and he was arguing that was an okay thing, because, and his quote was, what kind of Christians are we if our faith only lasts from Sunday to Sunday? So we, you know, that we only have faith when we can be there in person in the building, in other words. So yeah, so I thought that was really cool, because he was very happy to close the church and not have any kind of gatherings there, just to keep people safe, and that shouldn't impact your faith.
Yeah. So our faith is much bigger than any four walls or any pandemic. Well, thank you, everybody. And it's a joy to see people using their time to think about what our job is as Christians. So I'm always glad to see your faces. And Rochelle, you want Dave to stay on? You have a,
Oh, we could talk later on the phone.
okay. So for health and strength and daily food,
We give thee thanks, O Lord.
oh Lord. Amen. Okay, well,
Thank you,
Amen.
Gail. Blessings.
blessings. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Leave meeting.
I can't find mine either. There we go. Stop share. There we go. And stop.